we're going to be talking about how the Internet of Things is changing product development and manufacturing. Kind of a different topic for us, but we're really excited to kind of tackle this subject. It's clearly something that more and more people are going to be discussing and talking about, as it's going to have a big impact on all of us here, not too far in the future. Kind of a cool way that this came about, just kind of the the power of social networking and things like that. My colleague Adrian Messer is involved in some groups on LinkedIn, and got kind of hooked up with one of our speakers, Lee Stogner, and noticed that he'd been doing some talks about this topic, and it was something that we wanted to discuss with our group, and so reached out, and here we go. Here we are today, having this webinar. So we're really excited to have some new faces with us, or new voices rather. You're not going to see their faces today, presenting this webinar. So we've got Lee Stogner. He's the president of Vincula. I hope I said that right, and is also very, very much involved with IEEE and the Project Management Institute. So some great background there. And we've also got Keith Plemons, who is a professor, an engineering professor at the Citadel. So great information, no doubt, that these guys are going to be able to share with us today. Before we get started, just want to cover a couple housekeeping items. I am recording this, so we'll put this up on our website, not too long after we get finished today, so you can check it out again or share it with colleagues that might have missed out today. And also, we would love for you to ask questions throughout the presentation. You just type those into the little chat box, and I'll see those, and I'll get those questions tossed over to Lee and Keith. So try and make this as interactive as we can, with all of us being so spread out, but definitely feel free to ask anything that you might want some clarification on. And with that, I won't waste any of their time, because I know they've got lots and lots to share. I'm going to change the screen over to Lee and let them get started.
Well, thank you. Just a quick mic check. Can you hear me, Maureen?
Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. Okay. Well, good afternoon. This is Lee Stogner, and I am sharing this webinar from my office in Greenville, South Carolina, and my partner, Dr. Keith Plemons, is located in Charleston, South Carolina. So we're covering quite a lot of territory here to bring this to you and give you a chance to learn more about the Internet of Things. This presentation is an introduction, so if you're a senior person in this topic, sit tight and ask questions, and you can try to stump the speaker at the end of the presentation. But bottom line, it's worth your while whether you're just learning about this. We're going to tell you all the major buzzwords and get you involved in things. But if you're a senior person, we're going to introduce you to a network of people around the world that I'm sure somebody out there can challenge you with knowledge and technology that will help you with your own Internet of Things project. So with that, you have two speakers. My name is Lee Stogner. As Maureen said, I'm heavily involved with the IEEE and PMI. Keith, you want to do your introduction?
Yes, my name is Keith Plemons. I'm an engineering professor at the Citadel here in Charleston. I worked for 20 years before I came back to teach, and this the Internet of Things and the impact of project management across the spectrum of industries is my area of research. Other than that, I'm ready to get started.
Great. Now we're going to do things in...
Lee, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. We aren't seeing your screen. I think you had the PowerPoint slides up, but you got to hit the yes to approve us viewing your screen.
Do you see it now?
Not yet.
How about now?
There it goes. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. So we're going to do this presentation in two parts. I'm going to do the introduction, share a lot of buzzwords with you and make sure you understand the full scope of the Internet of Things. It's not just manufacturing. It's going to heavily impact about every industry in the world, and also how we connect these industries side by side. Keith is going to come at it from a product development and a project management standpoint. These projects can be incredibly complex, and Keith is going to give you a heads up on a methodology that will allow you to determine what your needs are and how to begin the execution and keep the promise to your manager that it will come in on schedule and certainly under cost. So with that, let's get started. There we go. A little bit of definition. The Internet of Things. It's a growing trend that's providing connectivity, communications, and internetworking between a variety of devices. And a device can be, a temperature probe in a process, some sort of device that measures the presence of a thing or a person or even a vehicle. And we're putting this under the broad umbrella of the Internet of Things because there's a lot of things in the world, and this new concept of the Internet that is changing rapidly is that foundation, it's that link that ties everything together. There is one other buzzword you should know about, and it's sometimes used interchangeably with the Internet of Things. It's called M2M. A lot of telecom people, the Verizons, the British Telecom, their equivalents around the world, don't say Internet of Things, they say M2M. And it's a device, it's a concept that ties things together at the communications level. Also, as you go around the world, while we North Americans say Internet of Things, Europeans say Internet 4.0, Asians say Internet Plus. It's basically at its core the same thing, but a lot of people are taking this extremely serious and betting institutions and companies. In the case of China, Internet Plus is now one of the driving factors in their next 5-year plan. They're literally betting the country on the capabilities and success of bringing the efficiencies and increased abilities to their industries and their supply chains and their people that Internet Plus will bring. Okay, a little bit about the revolution. On your left side of the screen, you'll see a gentleman by the name of Vince Cerf, spelled C-E-R-T. He is going to be my keynote speaker at the IEEE Internet of Things World Forum that will be in Washington early in the month of December. And he is given credit for the background protocols and other mathematical things that makes the Internet of Things possible, especially the addressing of my laptop, your smartphone, Keith's desktop, and all the things that you see increasingly in manufacturing plants, along the highway, and in use every day. In the 95 to 2000 spectrum, we geeks had a chance to start playing with what Mr. Cerf invented, and we started connecting, labs and schools together. The military, through their DARPA project, actually funded a lot of this, and people started connecting, in the dozens and then hundreds of things, things through this IoT. Then by the year 2000, it became broad screen. You started seeing internet cafes popping up on streets and cities. You started seeing your local library or even your company start to connect to this thing and transfer information between customer and provider and supply chain, and so on. And then 2007 hit, and we all started getting our smartphones, and we all started having our personal internet IP address in our back pocket. The cell phones, whether they dumb or smart, really gave the IoT its visibility and just really possibilities that Mr. Cerf never dreamed of when he came up with the addressing. So now, 2012 and especially beyond, we are literally covering the planet, and I will show you a picture in a moment of how little IoT devices are just everywhere. And they're no longer hundreds, they're millions, and now billions. In 60 seconds, this is sort of a busy slide, but it shows that the Internet of Things is not just email, although email was one of the killer applications that got us all going on this concept, but we're looking at information, we're talking about video, we're talking about process control, CAD designs, all sorts of supply chain logistical information. All this stuff is flashing around the world. You see some samples of just what is happening not only in 60 seconds, but every 60 seconds. We're talking petabytes of data, and then numbers beyond that with even more zeros that you've probably never heard of. Now, the potential of IoT, now that you've heard a few buzzwords. A gentleman by the name of John Chambers, he is now the Just X CEO of Cisco, a major internet networking company. They produce switches and routers and all the things that connects all the dots together. I was at a presentation that he gave in Chicago 2 years ago where he tagged the value of the Internet of Things. He said 19 trillion, that's trillion with a T, opportunity. And usually when you say something, even as outrageous as that sounds, people want to question the number. Well, one half of the table says 18 trillion, the other half says 20 or 21. Pretty darn close in the scope of things. This is big, and it's going to be a factor that's going to drive not only we in the U.S., but, you know, our friends and competitors all around the world. So think of what you can do in a marketplace that's as big as $19 trillion. So not only Cisco is interested in a piece of this, quote, action, you've got little companies like IBM and probably even your own. IBM here announced back last year that they were investing $3 billion into IoT products, services, and solutions. Since then, they've announced even more. Other companies such as the Microsofts, the Facebooks, the Googles, Honeywells, ABB, even Rockwell, you know, all the above are investing heavily because they need a future for their company, and it takes some changes in how we do business to not only seek your fortune in this business, but also grow individual pieces that mean something to each one of us. Is IoT on the trend? There's a large consulting company called Gartner. You may have heard of them. They have something called the Hype Cycle that they publish fresh every, usually August of each year, in which they look at all the technologies that are affecting human activity and what we're doing to, well, go ahead, if you will. And you can see things that have come before IoT, and you can see IoT approaching a very peak of this curve, and the impression now is when IoT gets to the top of this curve will flatten out a bit, and it will have a nice long run, if you will, at the peak of interest. Things that have gone before IoT in terms of technology include things like smart grid. I know when I first involved in smart grid for the local electric company 5 years ago, conferences would cost $3,000 a head just to get into. Now, a smart grid conference is well under $1,000 because the technology is a standard tool in the toolbox of people that need it to do their job and support their companies. IoT will get there in the future as the technology becomes more standardized, more common, and things created in Greenville can plug into things that are created all over the world. Okay, this is a very busy diagram, but I wanted this to show you how broad and how deep the use of the IoT is going to be for companies, people, institutions, and even government. So hopefully you've got a high-resolution screen because you can read it on a good screen. Things. How many things are out there? I mentioned dozens, then hundreds, then more. A number of people are predicting by the year 2020, which is just around the corner, there will be as many as 50 billion devices, all connected at the same time. That's a good thing, but also it can be a bad thing if you remember what happened just last week. So more on that in just a few more slides. For me, my son and I did a count around our home, and we came up with 86 devices that range from Blu-ray players to TVs to watches, computers, smartphones, iPads. We've got a growing base of IoT devices right here that we live with and depend on more and more every single day. Here's a map of the world. A friend of mine created software that it takes about 6 hours to run, but it goes out and finds every available IP address on the planet. And as it finds a lot of them, that spot is turned red. So you see the things east of the Mississippi or far west to California and Washington, and certainly Europe. The dots are a mile deep, if you will, showing all the things that are connected right now. This slide is about a month and a half old. We'll take another snapshot in a year and see how the dots have gotten deeper and spread further. Some devices. I'm not going to explain each one of these device types, but certainly we have products, we have industry, we have consumer, commercial, we have healthcare, which includes that new category of wearables. Everything has an IP address providing a service or a feature to we, the consumer. More things. If you go to your hospital, if you go to your local Starbucks, a lot of things are being connected one at a time to this backbone called the Internet of Things. People are increasingly connected. I know my Fitbit is connected. My smartphone is connected. A friend of mine has a pacemaker. He is connected so his doctor knows how well he's performing, if you will, 24/7. Things are connected. If you've heard of the concept of the connected vehicle, starting in 2017, personal cars, fleet managed cars, police cars, the school bus in front of you, everything will be increasingly connected to provide increased safety on the highway. I hate to say it, but the Holy Grail is supposedly to put ever more cars on our roads. But the goal is efficiency and safety. With a connected vehicle, your 2017 car will be able to know if there's a school bus around the corner or ahead of you in the fog that is stationary and otherwise not moving while you're moving at 50 miles an hour. A lot of good reasons for things to be connected. Trivia question: who was the first company to begin this world of connected vehicles? Why, it was General Motors and their OnStar system. It was expensive in its day, but it provides service and features to cars like Cadillacs. But now, look this time next year at the variety of vehicles that we connected electronically to each other, to the cloud, to the intelligent roadbed, and a lot of other ways in which you can connect either personal vehicles or big vehicles such as school buses and 18-wheelers. wireless sensor networks. These sensors are not always connected me to you. They're connected one to the other. Like you could have an array of sensors on a farm or in a forest collecting information about how well the crops are growing or how well the soil and its temperature and pH and wetness is doing. Lots of reasons to deploy these sensors everywhere and also monitor them in the cloud and also allow them to connect to each other. How are the networks changing? And I apologize if I'm going too fast, but we have a lot to cover in the space of just an hour. Networks are growing. The Internet of Things is not just your Ethernet cable going over to your personal router in your den. It's networking backbones that go through an office building or a factory. It's not only hardwired, it's wireless. The advent of a new cellular protocol called 5G, which will be here, we're told, within about 18 months, is going to increase the rate of transmission and the volume of information between everything just in time for these, multiple billions of devices to start working at the same time. Future networks, the goal is anytime connection, any place connection, and anything connection. The Internet naming protocol just went through a big revision in the past year so it could address directly billions more devices. And by the way, just in time, because we were running out this time last year of individual addresses that could be addressed. You may say, well, in my house, my 100 devices are all addressed behind my modem. That's true. But in spite of that, the world needs millions and billions more addresses constantly, as far as you can see, into the future. Now, what do we as individuals or companies or institutions need to know about IoT? And really the big question is, why do I even care about IoT? Number one, it's the biggest business trend in the world right now. It allows us to make use of emerging technologies that bring efficiency to a lot of what we do. There's a growing number of IoT services and applications that you can take advantage of. And for we business people, your competition is already there. You have no choice, as they say, but to take advantage of this technology and the new opportunities that will be coming your way if you are using an Internet of Things based business model. Opportunities. This is another somewhat busy slide, but I think it's a good slide. Communications, retail, transportation, industrial, medical, and as I get older and older, some of those machines on that part of the slide look familiar. We need to stay connected, and we need to stay connected to experts and databases in the cloud that we need to tap into in order to do even our daily job. Technology trend, going from lower left to upper right. We thought it was cool 5 years ago just to put a tag on a pallet and know when something you just manufactured in your plant left the factory. It's still cool. But beyond that, we started thinking of other applications. Surveillance, security, healthcare, transport, document management, knowing where things are. Your average trucking firm right now employs something called fleet management. It's not only important to know where an individual truck is, but to be able to manage hundreds, if not thousands, of trucks and their people at the same time. If you look at my local utility, which is Duke Energy, in times of crisis, and the South is famous for its ice storms, you need to move a lot of trucks, people, and material to where the storm just level things such that you can bring the electricity back up and also provide needed services to the people affected. As we keep going further to the upper right, we start thinking about telepresence, the ability to monitor and control very distant objects. If you're a company with assets around the world, whether you're an energy firm, oil, gas, transportation firm, there's a lot of information you need to know about in real time. And with the remote sensors of the Internet of Things, you can capture information from places in your town and compare it to similar information collection that might be taking place on the West Coast, even Antarctica. It is a real-time world. Okay, one more busy slide. If you're an entrepreneur with a startup or an existing company that you want to continue to grow, this is a slide that shows companies that are in the world of Internet of Things. You'll look at this slide and say, geez, there's a lot of strange looking names. Well, yeah, the Internet of Things is famous for funny names. But the key thing is, virtually every single one of these companies on this slide did not exist beyond 5 years ago. And now these companies are thriving, they're growing, and they're setting the foundation for even more companies well into the future. So if you're an entrepreneur or you've got kids to put through college, you may want to consider the Internet of Things for your own business opportunity, or something you bring to your manager at work and say, let's try this. This will be good for our company. Architecture. Quickly before I turn things over to Keith, let's say a bit about how things are organized. In the world of the computer network, computer people love to divide things into layers. And if you look at this multi-layer slide, let's start at the bottom. At the very bottom is the physical world. You see those devices, all 50 billion of them. Some are measuring temperature, some are measuring flow, some are measuring the fact that a can of beans just went by on the conveyor belt. It's a lot of things that are being measured from these remote sensors. Above it is the layers of networking, whether they're wired or wireless, that sort of aggregates and integrates this information together so we can manage how it's being collected and make sure it continues to be collected in real time day after day. So you go above the physical world to the sensor network. One step above that is the wide area network. And then at the top of that is the so-called cloud, where many of our company data centers have migrated. And in those data centers in the cloud resides applications that you will hear at work that include things like Oracle, SAP, and a lot of other big enterprise level processing applications that understand what just happened 10,000 miles away and make sure that information is processed in a transaction in the cloud to make sure that that customer, that service recipient needs are being done. If you're at the hospital and information is needed by the doctor on what is your family history or your personal history, healthcare records are increasingly moving to the cloud such that your family doctor has the information. But if you should have an accident on the highway on the other side of the country, that doctor can know a lot about you in seconds in order to treat you, not over-medicate you, or do something that doesn't fit your current situation. So healthcare is becoming increasingly enabled and empowered by the Internet of Things. The architecture of IoT. This is sort of a layer version of what you just saw in the graphic. And at the bottom again, you see different kinds of sensors. You'll see different types of gateways and networks, whether they're wired, they're Wi-Fi, they're M2M communications kind of networks, and then layers of software processing above that. And again, note in the top pink level, it's a lot of things supporting a lot of applications, and even more next week and next year. Layer 1 is that lowest layer, the sensor layer. It connects the physical and the digital world. Layer 2 is the beginnings of the network infrastructure that makes sure your plant, your building, even your home, or the highway that you're on at the moment can handle you as an individual source of information at the proper level of bandwidth, and that S word that's becoming ever more important, S for security. Layer 3, management services. A lot of information processing takes place at that one layer below the cloud, where you have the ability and the need to distribute the processing. For example, if you're in a pharmaceutical plant, you have validated control loops and other local processing that can't depend on the cloud, because that batch of medicine or that critical need has to have, in many cases, millisecond response. So layer 3 is where the critical applications take place. And then layer 4 is where we connect things across from HR to financial to shop floor control, logistics, those folks over in engineering doing product design. Layer 4 brings it together at the big application level, oftentimes called the enterprise level. Applications, quickly. Product development, all the things that you've been doing for years in your plant or your company is still being done, but we're doing it more efficiently. We're providing shared information that you wished you had that had to come through a middleman and take days, if not weeks in the past. Now, with shared databases and that word called the cloud, your design, your piece of the overall product is carefully determined, positioned, designed into what you're doing, and put into the master bill of materials that is sent to your shop floor or one halfway around the world. So product development, the smart home in my house right now is an example of it, as I control more and more things around the house. Smart cars, we mentioned that, not only for the connectivity beyond the vehicle, but there's a variety of networks within the vehicle, and in many cases with newer cars, you've got supercomputer capability, allowing the powertrain to work effectively with other systems all through the car. E-healthcare. Yes, I'm reaching that age where my doctor wants to know more about me more often. I recognize everything on this slide. Smart farms. We need to produce more product on less land as we increase the size of our cities and everything else associated with humankind. So with the Internet of Things, we know more about what it takes to grow the crops of tomorrow. Smart factories. This is the place where the Rockwells and the Siemens and ABBs have made vast fortunes over the year. But just like the corner place or store you used to buy music, well, it's not there anymore. We now buy our music from the cloud, from iTunes and Google and other places. Same thing is happening to smart factories. These intermediate layers of controls, controllers, MES systems, they're being replaced where it makes sense physically and economically by compressed layers of monitoring and control. So when I show this slide in a year or two, all the stuff in the middle won't be there unless you have a critical need to have local control. It's going to be down to sensors at the bottom, some data aggregators, and then the applications like SAP and Oracle. They're getting process automation modules as we speak, attached directly to all the other information that they manage. Industries. Quickly, the biggest industries to get IoT at this moment is automotive, consumer, and utilities. The smart grid is paving that road for the energy companies. And then the rest of the industries are getting their opportunity to make use of more accurate and connected information. Standards. It's not going to connect together and work unless what I'm creating plugs into what you're creating or you're buying. So this is a slide that shows some of the organizations around the world that are creating hardware connections, software connections, that will allow these multiple layers that I've probably spent too much time on connecting from one to the other. Some samples of how the standards are enabling connectivity. This is the smart grid and electric vehicle standard example. All these things from energy production, energy transmission, energy distribution, right down to the factory and the home, would not take place unless standards had been in place just before the integration to make it all possible. And it's two-way. Energy will flow to the smart home, and in a growing number of places, energy produced at the home or provided to the home from the batteries of your new electric vehicle can go back on the grid to keep the grid up and make sure things stay balanced correctly. Smart grid and transportation. And we're not just talking electric vehicles, electric buses, we're talking about trucks, we're talking about trains, airplanes in the sky, and it's not just electric, it's hybrids and things driven by gas and clean diesel. Those fuel types are going to be with us for quite a while, but connecting all of these types of vehicles together electronically makes a lot of sense if we're going to improve the safety and make sure that we can maintain the abilities to move lots of people and lots of product from point A to point B. Smart buildings. Some of you on this call may be in charge of making sure your building manages its energy correctly. You see before you a number of standards that are in place to make sure that we're not only connecting at a personal communications level, but the energy producers and the energy users know what's going on and make best use of expensive energy. In terms of the communications protocol, many are in place right now, making sure that the energy produced at the local power plant does get to the consumer reliably, and even when a crisis such as an ice storm or some of the hurricanes the South is also famous for, energy can be sent directly or rerouted because of the IoT-enabled smart grid. Digital health. More and more we're using wearables and other smart devices at the hospital to make sure that the doctor knows everything the doctor needs to know about you correctly and accurately. A bit more on the wearables. Think of the process parameters your plant and building has. Well, there's a similar number within our bodies, and the doctor needs to know, you need to know. Again, made possible by the Internet of Things. Okay, last standard slide. I don't want to give the impression that the IEEE is control of every IoT standard. You will see before you different standards from IoT, from IEC, and other standards organizations around the world. And the point with this is standards organizations work together to make sure that one standard from one part of the world interfaces with the standard here in our world. Some dominate, but they all do work together. It's a work in progress, and there are working groups to make sure that all of this happens. I happen to be on the working group for transportation IoT and communication standards. It's a lot of fun if you're an engineer. Product development and management. Keith, this is your turn. Let me know when to change the slide.
Great. Thank you, Lee. Now, Lee has introduced some of the potential, some of what's going on in our world around us and around how it maybe even impact our own personal lives. But the idea of all the potential that it brings to our companies and our careers is what I'd like to approach. Because some of these are small. You could say, well, I could tackle a small IoT project. I could put some sensors on a piece of equipment, and it would be, very informative and useful. However, for some companies, this is business critical. And this is where, because their competitors are bringing to market things that is going to put them out of business unless they pick up and go forward. Lee, next. So let's look a little bit at the future. So this is the idea. Let's begin with the end in mind. So let's think systems, because at a systems level, the message and the story around the Internet of Things is data. Data that flows up, data that comes back around every cycle, every reporting cycle, and almost continuously within our world. The thing about how does it fit? So where does the Internet of Things fit in your business model? Because there's where the strategic planning, the strategic initiatives, the flow of the decision makers at those levels bring it down to us, to what we are as project managers to implement. Some of the organizations are very serious about this, and they're leveraging the business tools to be able to collaborate across projects and stakeholders. They may even be implementing metrics that monitor dashboards for operational and project success. So then when you get there and you kind of look at your organization and say, what are our constraints? What is our strategy? Do we have the people available to deliver on this? And do we have the methodologies to walk our way through to success? So then the question is, can IoT projects be done at a small level? Absolutely. Can they be done at scale, maybe even globally, using agile methodologies which deliver very quickly and also in an adaptive way? And I wanted to stop here for a second about agile. Agile is primarily built around milestones or major phases that deliver on an overall strategy. And so that this methodology is adaptive. And I want to point out that when you're dealing with the Internet of Things, it's very important to maintain an adaptive mentality rather than that says we're going to walk our way through to a final result. Instead of like an older traditional methodology which says, here's our complete design, here's our developed architecture and so forth, let's go build this big thing. Now then, Agile says, let's look at it in pieces and walk our way through the process. Next, Lee. I lay this out because for me, when I look at Lee's slides and Lee's points that he's making, I wanted to summarize this in a much larger scale. That when you walk through each of these, because I mentioned before about the story of data. This is a story of data. So your data starts here at the bottom from all these sensors, walks you through the communication and access layer to the services platform. You may have a service platform as a service, somebody who's doing collaborative work that ties the machines and ties the networks together. But at the end of the cycle, at the top point, it says what is displayed on my device. And very often that is where your information comes from, that's where your reports are made, and that's where your decisions are implemented. And so once that decision goes back, follow back the loop down through the identity and access management to get to the device that says, yes, turn yourself off or turn yourself on. And I use this as an example. When you have a large piece of heavy equipment, you may have telematics that says, if this piece of machinery walks itself out of this location by GPS, you have a kill switch, and it becomes a piece of metal on the side of the road. So you're able to do this and manage your assets and in a very strong, effective way. Now then, next, Lee. Now that I mentioned about the story of data, and I show this. Let's start down in the lower left-hand corner. When you have a project site, a facility, a fleet, or a product that you're either implemented or sold to someone, you may even have a pilot project that's been put out to the field to see how it performs. That data flows through the cycle on the right-hand side, but also very often a Internet of Things device is smart enough that it is actually reading its physical location from a GPS satellite. So it knows, just like I mentioned about my bulldozer, it knows exactly where it is. And so at the same time, it's talking either to the local cell tower or the local communication system on a project site or in a facility, or if it's linked up and it's remote, it'll be going to a satellite above in orbit. It all comes down, and I show this as a server. That information and that data flows to that server and then to your device. And there's where on that device is where you're able to make your decisions. Then it flows back through the cycle, back through the loop, through the tower to your product or piece of equipment. Next, Lee. This is, and I mentioned before about project management. This is a high-level conceptual introduction to project management, from initiating to planning to executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing processes. Many people think about these 5 major process groups. This is how we manage people and processes. That's project management. Technology is just what we do, what we deliver at the end of the day. And so when you're doing project management, it's people and processes. That's what I wanted to focus on here. So when we're developing a new product, we do the planning, we do the introduction, and then the third phase I show here is a post-launch product management. So you're actually, each phase ends up being its own standalone phase or project as we approach these 5 process groups. This is how Project Management Institute, this is how a lot of people see it, because each of the phases may be conducted by a different person or a different office or a different company. Next, Lee. Now then, for those who are systems engineers online, I wanted to put this out because some people in the systems engineering world, myself included, think of systems engineering as agile. How fast can we work through the new product development using the systems engineering V? And I show the phases across the top. Most people are familiar with that. But it's the idea that you're focused on the product and technology and processes, not the people. And so when we're doing systems engineering and we're bringing a new product to market, we start over here on the left-hand side with phase 1, and we do our requirements, and we get those requirements through. We walk ourselves through the phases on decomposition and definition. We do the engineering. We get the thing on paper, or we get it into manufacturing by going across the bottom where it says implementation and transition. That's the phase where it goes from design to fabrication and starts with the small subsystems and the small components all the way up through, and it gets to the point where there's a pilot. And then as it walks into operations and maintenance, this is what I wanted to get to, is because when we operate and maintain or even run a pilot test, we're receiving data. This is where the feedback loop really pays off, because we have telematics that takes it remotely. We have the feedback that comes back on how our customers are using our product. And I use the word use because very often they're abusing our product and using it in ways that it was not planned for. And then you have the operational and performance data. That feedback, that data flows back through the Internet of Things, and look where and it goes through an analytics, it gets scrubbed, but look where it resides. It comes back into the engineering process to develop the next round of products. We get to know where we either develop a new product or we beef up different aspects of an existing product. And so this, in the little blue box that sits on top of the V, most people don't see this, most people don't think about it unless you're actually using that data to develop the next level or the next round of products and services. So this is what I see as I call this my Agile Systems Engineering V, because it allows us to do this quickly and efficiently and at a rapid pace. Next, Lee. Now I use this is a concept diagram. This is when you think of this as conceptual. I wanted to introduce this because the Internet of Things starts over here on the left-hand side as innovations. The Internet of Things will change our relationships with our stakeholders, with our design team, within our organization. It will change how we do business. It changes our contracts. It will start showing up as metrics on people's dashboards because they have real-time data on the performance of their project or their products. The thing about the practices, policies, and procedures, this is where people's business models will change to reflect the innovations that are necessary in their organization. And you notice how the arrows kind of flow around, some go in one direction, some kind of look like a loop. Yes, you see the loop between the relationships, the results, and the practices, policies, and procedures. That loop, the faster that loop turns, the better the new products go to market. And I show this because it lays out how important Internet of Things will play in our future. Next. Innovation we talked about. Now let's think about the lessons there. The Internet of Things is accelerating product research and development. No longer do you have to do a lot of physical out in the field type work and observations. You're getting real-time data from your products. And this thing about changing our practices and products delivered. How quickly can things go to market? How quickly can software be updated? How quickly can you know that something is not right or not functioning well? Or, here's the other thing, the thing about changing business models, that in the future you may not be buying an air conditioner for your building. You may be buying, as in the physical air conditioner, you may be buying air conditioning, and that you have a service provider that provides you cold air in the summertime and warm air in the wintertime. There's the thought, and I introduced that because the business models will change. I put this little point in the middle because I keep seeing this coming up because people don't think of digital identities that for an individual product. They don't see a bulldozer going down the street and thinking that thing has a digital identity, but soon it will. Soon someone will know when it needs maintenance, where it is located, who's operating it, and under what performance standards is it operating. And so this full product transparency is coming, and those people who take advantages of it and understand how critical these projects are will find a future. The thing about future business models, yes, they will align with customer behaviors. Recognizing this and how important it is to deliver these projects efficiently and effective and add value and bring value to the company is going to be the challenge. And I end with this last little piece about a significant perspective shift. This, for some people have already made that shift in thinking to a digital mindset of product and project management. Others will be there shortly, or they will be doing something else. And so I'll leave these lessons here with Lee, and for that, Lee, what's next?
Next are some challenges and issues that we all face as we transform to the IoT business model. Number one, society, people, security, privacy. I want my information to stay to me, And of course, everyone else on the call wants to keep what they are doing private to them. There is legislation underway to hopefully mitigate some of the issues around security and privacy. Environmental aspects. We do need to make better use of our resources. They're not unlimited. And we need to make sure that pollution and disaster avoidance is a top priority. From technology standpoint, architecture, governance, service openness, connections of real and virtual, and is it all built on a foundation of standards? The IoT is going to inherit drawbacks of the current internet on an infinitely larger but more invisible scale. Again, privacy, identity, efficiency, decisions, and a balance between good, bad, right, wrong, what we can afford, what we can't afford, and those things that proverbially go bump in the night. The transition to more and more addresses, that did take place. We call that IPv6, and it is working very well. A common set of standards in terms of cabling, programming, how it all plugs together. And I'll be doing another webinar coming up on November 11th. Let me know if you want to attend. How do we provide power to all these billions of devices that may not be under your roof or in your plant, but may be, 2,000 miles away on a remote telephone pole or out on the ocean? It takes energy to make the world of IoT work. Challenges and issues. Last week, look at the side of this map that is the U.S. You'll see a red zone. That's where the bad guys hit with a very large, very fast-acting attack that took down large portions of the internet. It happened. A lot of folks looked into what just happened and what caused it, and surprisingly, there was a manufacturer of webcams, a Chinese company by the name of Hangzhou Yangmai, had sold a number of low-cost webcams that, sat on the telephone pole or in front of your house or just anywhere, giving you a reliable picture of something that needed to be monitored, but it was made too inexpensive. It was made with less sophistication than these devices really need, and tens of thousands of these devices were hacked and told to go to a certain address, and that address was the DYN, which is a place that allocates addresses for the Internet of Things, and driven by a piece of software called Mira, all these devices and others hammered a small handful of addresses for hours and hours, and it just overwhelmed those individual devices with all these requests and commands coming in over the wire. So it was coordinated, it was diabolical, if you will accept that word, and we learned from it. This time it was done by webcams. It may be done by your refrigerator or your Blu-ray player or something else in your house the next time. So the products that are out there are going to have to be reviewed. The ones in the design and manufacture pipeline will need to go and understand that they need to be evaluated before they go to market. The world of bad guys aren't going to go away, but we need their security connected and coordinated with privacy and standards to make sure it doesn't happen again. For more information, last slide. My organization, the IEEE, has several things going for it. We have a lot of people around the world, most of them more smart than I, that are hard at work on hardware, software, standards, and how all of this works together. And they're working under the umbrella of what we call the IEEE Internet of Things Initiative. And you see before you the address. Write this down. We have forums, discussion groups, blogs, where we're trying to share all the information that we gather together or we develop ourselves, and we provide it through LinkedIn, through Flipboard, through Twitter. Our standards that have been developed and the ones that are coming are available through our standards organization, and we have a library of intellectual papers and other technical documentation that is in the IEEE Explore Digital Library. If you're developing a product, go to this library. You probably already know about it, but if you're just starting out, you might not. All of these sources of information can help you in your journey to the Internet of Things and the eventual goal, which is what we call the digital economy. So with that, Maureen, we'll turn things over to you and let you manage a few questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I think it's just amazing, all the information, and no doubt we could talk, for days on end about this, and it'll be interesting, almost a year from now if we kind of revisit this and just see, how much things will have changed in just a year's time or even 6 months. This is like a boulder rolling down the hill, right? It's just going to keep picking up speed. So thank you so much for sharing this great information. If people do have questions, I think now we're up against time, so we'll get those sent over to you, or obviously we can get Lee and Keith's contact information to you folks. I did record this. We'll get it up online. I know I'm going to want to go back and watch it again and and pick up things that I missed. But really, really great, and really appreciate you guys taking the time. This is no doubt just the beginning of us, hoping to cover it, and we'll look forward to seeing where this thing goes and how we can all play a part. So Lee and Keith, thank you again, and everybody else have a great day, and we'll be in touch soon with